Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. He is through Cold Omaha. He is through the Daily Norseman, a myriad of other blogs and podcasts. He is Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I would like to point out that you are a useful human, but we have an aspiring useful human also on the line.
That's true.
He is from the You Don't Know Jack, JAC podcast, along with the Shuby Show. He is our intern. He is Carson Schubert. Carson, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. How are you guys doing?
We are doing fantastic. We are rolling out a new idea. I think we're fantastic.
We are.
Fantastic. Good. So we are rolling out a new idea. We have an intern on. I have an intern on the show. What good is the spring if you can't make somebody work for you for free? So that's what we're doing. And especially if they're in college and get some sort of experience out of this. So we have Carson Schubert here. He is going to help out. He is going to occasionally host a couple of shows. He and Dusty have been talking for a little while, so we want to make sure that we welcome Carson into the fold. And Carson, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you again. Honored to be a part of Norse Code, and I've grown up and lived in Northwest Iowa my entire life. And as many of you probably know me from the Andy, Luke, and Arif football machine, I've called in there multiple times. I enjoy doing my 2 podcasts that I've got going on, and I just enjoy Vikings football, of course, among other sports as well. And I'm in my sophomore year of college right now, and I am really looking forward to going into the sports broadcasting and journalism field. I'm at a community college right now and looking to transfer to a 4-year college after I'm done 2 years at the community college I'm at currently. So,
what are you going to study?
I'm planning on studying journalism, broadcasting, communications, that kind of thing. So, and
that makes sense.
Yeah. And I've been doing play-by-play for football, basketball, volleyball, baseball at my school, and I also have a job at a radio station about half an hour from where I live now. So I've been getting some good experience in this field, and I really enjoy using my talents to express my love of sports.
I was told that you have a great play-by-play story.
Well, I don't know if it's great, but I'll tell it. So basically, my first ever play-by-play game that I did, if you don't count Madden, it was my first basketball game. And basically, what happened, I think it was either the day of or the day before, the technology guy at my school told me that they're going to be broadcasting the basketball game either tonight or tomorrow night, whatever it is. And I was like, and they were like, do you want to do the play-by-play? And I was like, sure, of course. And so I do the game, and it was a very close game all the way throughout, and it came down to the end, and the other team, West Lyon, and my school, Central Lyon, and we were playing West Lyon. Brandon Snyder, who actually plays for the Iowa Hawkeyes, was on the West Lyon side, and they ended up winning the Class 1A or 2A championship that year in basketball. But anyways, we had the ball last possession of the fourth quarter, and we missed a shot, like a 3 to 5 foot jump shot or whatever, and then our post player got the rebound, and just as time expired, put the ball back up and in, and I just couldn't believe it. I really had no words. I was just like, I don't even remember what my reaction. I was just probably like, "Oh my gosh," or something to that effect. It was just like I was just in shock for my first play-by-play game. So it was like it wasn't the best play-by-play game I've ever done, but it was definitely probably one of the most exciting ones I've ever done.
So it didn't end up to one of those things where it ended up on YouTube and you ended up becoming some sort of a meme or yelling, "Boom goes the dynamite" or something like that.
No. I have not had one of those moments yet.
Yeah.
The yet is
glad you're
important.
open to the possibility.
Yes. I did one really good game this past year. It was a double overtime game that my school won. I still announce play-by-play for my high school, even though I'm in college, because I still live in my high school town while I commute to my community college. So I'd still do that, and they pay me to do that. So I did a double overtime game this past year, and it was, even though both teams were bad, it was a really good game. And that was probably my last favorite moment other than that moment, my first game. I'll definitely never forget my first game. That was quite entertaining for me to watch, and like I said, it was so entertaining I was at a loss for words.
I really like the idea that it's just been all downhill from your first game.
Like, at that point, I should have just walked away. But instead, I decided to pursue it as a career.
I've peaked. Time to continue for 20 more years.
Well, great. Sounds good, and welcoming you to the show, and hopefully we have some fun with you over the summer, talking about the draft and all that. But let's get into the shilling real quick. As listeners will remember, we are not ad-based. We are supported by you guys. So if you would like to donate to Norse Code, if you hear value in our product, you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code and donate there. That's much like an NPR drive. It's a monthly thing. So if you can donate Tree Fitty or any amount of money you would like per month, you are certainly welcome to. We appreciate it. Otherwise, if you'd like to do a one-time donation, you can go to paypal.me/Norse Code, and you can donate through there, give us a little message, give us a little shout-out, tell us to keep going, tell us to just make sure to provide this amount of money to the Loch Ness Monster. We will do that. But that is how you support us. That is how you help us grow. So I just want to point out, I actually haven't been on the show in a while. According to the Daily Norseman updates, I haven't been on since the very beginning of November.
Wow.
And
That's
partially,
how do you feel about that?
Well, partially that was my decision, because right around that time the season was slipping away in a really, really difficult fashion, and I was finding it hard not to swear when talking about the team. So instead of going in and having to edit my cursing out of every single show, much like that San Francisco game the season before, decided it probably not be best if I just kind of stepped back for a little bit. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, so I assume the end of the season went well, right? Like we went to the playoffs?
Yep. Won the Super Bowl, actually.
Sweet. I must have slept through that.
Yeah, I missed the parade. Also won the Pro Bowl. It was great.
We also won the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
We're like the only team in history to ever win the Super Bowl, but we won the Pro Bowl first. We had to go. The Pro Bowl is important.
Yeah, it's the double crown. It's the first team in history to win both the Pro Bowl and the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Kyle Rudolph won MVP again.
By being the only player who cared when he played out there. Awesome. So let's talk about the big news that happened on Tuesday, which was on Teddy Bridgewater's Instagram account, was it? That there was a video posted.
Big news.
The big news is that someone who looks suspiciously like Teddy Bridgewater in Pro Bowl shorts attire was seen throwing a pass. Gentlemen, we can consider him our number one quarterback, and we can have a quarterback controversy again, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. He threw a pass. That's I think that's pretty definitive.
Yeah, that was a great pass. Definitely mid-season form right away. Right, let's put him in.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there are like a couple of things to draw from the video. As is, well, I mean, it's the off season, so we'll get super Zapruder into every video that comes out. But the things that are like legitimately, useful to draw from the video is that he's like putting all of his weight on his plant leg when he throws, which is of course how you throw. But it is good to see because it's really important that he stays on schedule for his recovery. I think this means he's probably neither ahead nor behind his recovery, which is fine because I think it reduces uncertainty. There's like a wide range of outcomes that could have happened after the injury, and I think this narrows that range of outcomes.
He's doing more than light swimming.
Right, yeah. Was it Zim who said, or Spielman who said that he was doing light swimming? And, which, I mean, that's a part of the recovery process, but it seems like, he's lying again, which, I mean, I'm fine with.
Like, it's certainly not the worst lie possible, but yeah, it was like watching that. My only thought was we were going to end up spending like 10 minutes analyzing like each particular moment. The thing that got me is that, like, you're watching the shuffling of the feet there. And you see his leg all wrapped up. Obviously, there's a brace underneath it and everything, but you just look at it, and all I'm thinking is that leg is functionally not there. Like it's just so tender and everything. Just looking and going, oh, that's too bad. Like he's really throwing it. And he's playing hard. I'm just like, I just feel so bad for his leg. It's like, I know how much pain you must be in right now. This must...
I hadn't really thought of the video as like a point of pity, but yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah, it's like anybody who's gone through like serious leg rehab. There's a couple of months where it's just absolute hell, and I imagine he's on like the general upswing of it. But at the same time, anybody who's gone through it is just going, man, I remember biting my lip and giving that one hell. Ooh, that. Ugh. So, Teddy Bridgewater is throwing passes, is looking halfway decent, and he still has skinny knees in his Pro Bowl shorts. Agreed?
Yeah, well, he needs his Pro Bowl shorts, which means he's going to have a Pro Bowl season. Mark it.
Is that what that means? So, if he's wearing a Bradford jersey while he's doing this, he's at least going to complete like a ridiculous amount of his passes, right?
Yeah, he's going to set a completion record.
It's going to be a storybook season. It's not going to sound like that. Bradford's going to get hurt after week 4. Teddy's going to come in and be the savior and lead the Vikings to be the first team ever to be playing in the Super Bowl in which they are hosting. I didn't know, Arif, if you knew that Minneapolis is hosting the Super Bowl next year because it definitely has not been announced by a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, no one's talked about it, so it's good that you brought that up.
And a bunch of billionaires haven't found a way to get a bunch of people to work it for free. So,
yeah,
good all around. Speaking of just irrational human beings for a moment, Adrian Peterson's still unemployed and is still saying things that seem to only make sense to him. So, Arif, why don't you handle this? Arif, he had a post on Twitter, which was a screenshot of an Instagram thing, because that's where we're at now. He had this post about how he is not demanding $8 million. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so there was another report. I think Pro Football Talk put the report out there that Adrian Peterson was demanding $8 million, and he wouldn't play anywhere without an $8 million contract. Which, of course, is ridiculous. Nobody believes that he's worth that amount of money. So I guess in response to that post, he, writes something on Instagram, screenshots it, posts it to Twitter, and I will attempt to quote it the best I can. All caps, "You can't believe everything you read or hear, people." Regular. "The last thing I'm worried about is playing ball this coming season. That will happen. It's not all about the money, as everyone is speculating here today. You'd think these analysts spoke to me directly. When you don't know what's going on, people will say anything to create or make a story. How prideful is it for me to put out ... I won't play for anything less than $8 million! ! No question mark. But see, when you don't know a person or what they stand for, it's easy to paint your own picture." And it goes on. But I think what he's saying is that he is not arrogant enough to demand $8 million or no contract at all. So that's what he's putting out there, that he's willing to negotiate down from 8 million. Either way, teams don't seem interested, and no one has hosted him for a visit, and his agent hasn't put out any information that he's being considered by teams. So who knows?
I don't think you had enough anger in that.
Well, I had to yell the all caps as is
tradition.
The stage directions of the internet. Yeah.
I look at his departure and I look at his kind of age and skill set, and it brings to mind when LaDainian Tomlinson left the Chargers and went over to the Jets. But by this time, the Jets had already signed Tomlinson. I believe it was like middle of March. So, and when LaDainian Tomlinson signed, he ended up getting like a $5 million contract. So, at some point, reality either sets in or enough people go down with injuries that he ends up getting a job. So he sounds like he's the videos he keeps posting on his Twitter account of his like exercise routines and everything. It seems like he's he's going to enjoy not going to training camp and just walking on wherever he ends up going.
Yeah, well, I assume that wherever he signs on, he's going to end up having to play in the preseason this time. So, good luck with that, buddy. I think that he will be signed, though. I think that he's going to be signed probably after the draft of some team. Some team probably covets 3 or 4 running backs in this excellent draft, and they don't get any of those running backs. I'm sure that they'd be willing, or even if they get a primary guy and they want a complimentary guy and they don't get the complimentary guy, I'm sure that they'd be willing to sign Adrian Peterson for $3-4 million, have him as a complimentary back, hope that, he recaptures his, first half of 2015 form, which wasn't amazing or anything like that, but it was definitely functional, possibly even starting quality form, and not second half of 2015 or the 3 games of 2016 that he had. So I think that there's something there that will allow him to get signed by teams. I know that there's that, I think it's a Mike Freeman report. Yeah, it's a Mike Freeman report that of the executives that he polled, almost all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them think that he's done and that he's a quote-unquote glorified fullback.
Glorified fullback.
Do
we have a fullback anymore? I just want to point that out that,
No, I don't think so.
No.
Carson, I don't think we have a fullback.
Is Zach Line still on the roster or not?
No, he got offered by, I think, the Bills, actually.
Yep, Bills.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. Also, incidentally, picked up Scott Crichton off of waivers for the benefit of defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier.
That's my least favorite Beatles song ever, by the way.
For the benefit of Leslie Frazier?
Sorry, for the benefit of... Yes. So he's eventually going to get employment out of this, but Sharrif Floyd on his post sounds like he just needs a hug. Carson, what do you know about this?
Well, I saw this just kind of basically wanting to let Vikings fans and just basically everybody else know that he's been dealing with stuff and he's trying to get back, and of course he was bringing his religious beliefs into it too, but he's just basically saying that he's been going through a lot of stuff and he's trying to get back and he's trying to get healthy and all this stuff, and yeah, it basically sounds like he needs a hug. I agree.
Yeah, the first half of the Instagram post, again, it's Instagram, but at least he didn't screenshot it and then tweet it, as far as I can tell. Maybe he did. The first half is fine. He's just thanks to God, you've blessed me, I'm thankful, etc. I prayed for you. And then it takes a turn kind of dark halfway through when he goes, I'm down on one knee praying my road doesn't end here. And it's oh, holy crap. Didn't realize things were that bad. And I know that Zimmer said that he had this leg thing that on a K-Fan interview. And of course the leg thing probably refers to the fact that he's got this knee injury that's been a problem for the Vikings for the past couple of years, but in particular that forced him to miss 15 of the 16 games last season. And
Zimmer basically publicly shamed him last year at some point. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on, man.
He seemed to come around, or at least he seemed to not do that again for the K-Fan interview. But last year he was just basically shitting on him. I don't know.
It is odd to read, especially knowing that the team was very down on his injury, but did decide to keep him and not cut him over the beginning of free agency. So it's, I don't know.
Yes, his contract is fully guaranteed now.
Yeah,
I mean, there's not
a bit disconcerting.
Yeah, I wonder if anything new came up for this to happen. I mean, because it's not just the one sentence. It's like everything after that sentence is like, all I ask for is a fighting chance. This game means so much to me, and the foundation is being laid one stone at a time. I'm hurting, and I don't know how to say it aloud. Grant me one last run. I promise I'll lay my soul on the, like, geez, man.
That's like running into your divorced buddy at the bar that you haven't seen in a while. Like, hey, dude, how's it going? I was like, oh, it's going all right. I mean, after she left and she took everything, I'm just sitting here just trying to make it right. But then she bounced a whole mess of checks, and I'm dealing with my credit destroyed and everything. But now I'm down on one knee. I'm hoping for like I don't need this kind of honesty. Actually, I just need.
I would rather just find out at the worst possible moment than you tell me now.
Like, I got Facebook. I've gathered that you're in rough shape, and I certainly watched you last year, but and listened to people talk about you. But I don't need this kind of honesty. The other big news over the past 2 weeks is that Brian Robinson restructured his deal, so now he is signed through 2018, which is important because we seem to have lost so many of the potential free agents over the past year.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like you said, a restructure, but also kind of extending, like they're putting some of the money. I think it's like Arif. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like $1.25 million or something that's being taken off his salary for 2017 and basically carrying over to 2018. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the actual individual details are. I know that the end result is that $1.6 million of cap space is being freed up, but I don't know, I'm sure that there's some change in guaranteed money, change in workout bonuses, incentive structure, etc., that might make those numbers work out, while at the same time they only moved $1.25 million into the next year. But what it does for the Vikings, of course, is it reduces his cap hit this year. It extends him one more year, but he only has a dead cap space of $1.5 million or something like that in 2018. So he's got some guaranteed money next year, or he's got some leverage next year, but not a ton. And the Vikings do have the capability of cutting him without taking too big a hit in dead space. So it's probably sort of a nice middle ground for the two of them.
Yeah, it's 1.25 dead against the cap next year, from what I see here.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I kind of thought maybe there was an idea that you could maybe trade him, but I think he's a very valuable part to the locker room. And like I said, trading him, I don't have anything against B-Rob. I love B-Rob, but just to maybe get rid of that salary, maybe get more youth in there, would be a possibility. But like I said, I think he is a very valuable piece leadership-wise, and especially now that Chad is gone, it's still good to have one of those veteran leaders in the locker room, I would say.
Well, let's look at his performance for a second, too. I mean, it's not like his performance has dropped off over the past year.
Right.
Well, yeah, I think that there's a lot of indication that Hunter's going to take over his role, and so his salary is going to be commensurate with what his role is going to be next year. But it is good that he's going to be on the team. Because it's nice to have that defensive end depth. I think that he's still a starting quality defensive end. He's not getting as much pressure as he did back when he was in his prime or anything like that. He's not batting as many passes down the line of scrimmage, something he was actually really crazy good at, until kind of J.J. Watt came and changed the game with regards to batting passes down the line of scrimmage. And he's not as solid of a run defender as he was a couple of years ago, but I think he's still a starting quality player in all of those respects, and now he's going to be a rotational player. He's probably not going to wear down that much in games then, which means that he might be more effective per snap in a role where Daniil Hunter ends up getting many more snaps. And Yeah, and he's going to be there either to directly teach Daniil Hunter about like all of the sort of technical tricks that he knows, or even if he's not going to be, a teacher, which, a lot of veterans don't like teaching the players that will replace them, so I kind of understand it. Even if he's not a teacher, he's going to be demonstrating all of those techniques. And everything that I know about Robinson is that he's, very willing to not just demonstrate, but also, take a direct role in, being a teacher on the field. So it's going to be good to have him around for, I think, a couple of reasons.
Unlike Adrian Peterson, not willing to take a lesser role, not willing to take lesser money.
Yeah, well, and that is that, and also not sure that Adrian would know how to teach what he does.
There's a lot of intangibles that are involved there. Plus, if you do want,
it's an instinctive position.
Yeah,
so,
right.
And if Daniil Hunter really wants to get on Robinson's good side, he just needs to go take him fishing.
That's true. Well, Robinson's probably much more willing to teach him how to fish, actually.
Yeah. If I've learned anything,
fishing and hunting.
If I've learned anything about him over the past couple of years from his Twitter account, it's that all he likes to do in the off season is work out and fish, and catch giant fish.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Latavius Murray, who we talked about on the podcast last episode as a potential signee. He has signed with the Vikings. He is going to be presumably running back 1, and immediately goes in for surgery. That is about the most Vikings thing possible. Arif, talk us down.
Classic. Well, evidently, it is. Evidently, the Vikings and every team that was pursuing Latavius Murray knew that he was going to need this surgery. I guess it's not that big a deal unless you've run across a piece of media that indicates that it is that big a deal. But from my understanding, it's not going to affect his off-season workout schedule. So it's like routine, whatever. I know that also kind of raises the hackles of Vikings fans, because there's so many times we've heard about like a routine arthroscopy or whatever, and like I think fans of other teams hear like a routine knee scope or something like that, and they're like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. And Vikings fans will hear like, oh yeah, they remove some chips from his ankle or whatever. It's routine. Like, oh, a routine surgery, we're doomed.
Well, like you said, I think they knew pre-signing that he was going to have surgery. But I guess just from my perspective, looking at this draft class that we've got in front of us, which I still think is really good. I know some people are kind of saying maybe it's not as good as we thought, but I still think it's really good. And I think if you would have told me that Latavius Murray needs surgery, I probably would have not signed him, just because of the depth in the draft. And you still have Jerick McKinnon. You still have guys that can compete. And not that Murray's not good or can't be good or whatever, but I just would put more money or more stock into a rookie than a guy that I'm giving more money to, and he's got to have a surgery, no matter how minor it is. I mean, it's kind of like, do we want to sign a guy that's got to have surgery right away? That kind of thing. But I don't know. I mean, overall, I like the Murray signing. I definitely think he brings better pass protection from the running back spot, and maybe a slight upgrade, I would say, in receiving. But I still don't think he's that great of a yards after contact back. From what I've heard from some Oakland people, they say for being kind of like Adrian's size, they kind of compare him to Adrian size-wise. They say he does not break as many tackles as what he should, which I don't know. I don't know if you've heard about that, Arif, but I've just kind of taken back by that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it is frustrating that's the case for him. He's like, what, 6? He's really tall for a running back, and he's got about the same weight as Adrian Peterson. But I think there's like sort of two things here. The first is that Adrian Peterson is insanely powerful for his size. And I don't mean that because he's an insanely powerful back, although that is necessarily true. But like people who hit as hard as him tend to weigh 15 to 20 pounds more than he does. He showed up at the combine like 217 pounds. Ran a lot of his seasons at 219, is around 212 now. He's a really powerful dude. And most 210, 215 pound running backs are not that powerful. So when you say he's the same weight as Adrian Peterson, you're essentially saying he's the same weight as most running backs. He weighs a little bit more than Jamal Charles, but he is a super tall dude. And I think that needs to be, given, a little bit of breathing room and be like, well, he's the same weight as a lot of running backs, not just Adrian. The second thing is, yeah, he's super tall, and that's a problem because he runs upright, which is one of the reasons that he doesn't generate those yards after contact. But I still think that he's a fully functional, capable runner who has the ability to get, I think, more yards after contact than Raiders fans give him credit for because they just expected so much more. And Adrian got away with running high because he was a physical freak. But Latavius Murray also runs high, and he doesn't get away with it, so he loses the leverage game a lot. And what Adrian did is he also lowered his shoulder at the point of contact, something that Latavius Murray doesn't do. So he doesn't have a lot of the same, features and roles. He's a surprisingly better goal line back if the last 2 years are anything to go by. Much more successful at the goal line and in third and short. So that's going to be a good element of the game to have with Jerick McKinnon as the other back. I think that to your point about getting a younger running back in a draft class just chock full of running backs, I definitely understand. I think that this move was more about giving the Vikings flexibility in the draft so they're not forced into one position or another, because now they're not forced into drafting a tackle. They're confident in Jeremiah Sirles at guards. They're not forced into drafting a guard. Now they're not forced into drafting a running back, and they can kind of figure out, hey, we've got maybe long-term concerns at tackle, at guard, at running back, at safety, whatever, but we're happy enough at all of those positions that we're going to preserve our long-term interests without having to worry about our short-term interests. And I think that signing a running back was kind of the cap on a free agency class that was more designed to give the Vikings breathing room than it was designed to, win the offseason.
How much would you think the Oakland offensive line played into Murray's success? Do you think it had a big role, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think in the sense that, so both Oakland and Dallas are well renowned for having excellent offensive lines, but I think that there's some level of conflation between the offensive lines. So I think that people see how amazing a pass blocking unit the Oakland's line is, and they see how amazing a run blocking unit that Dallas's line is, and they kind of impute the other value to that offensive line, that they're a great run blocking line at Oakland, that they're an amazing pass blocking line in Dallas. And in Dallas's case, that's sort of true. They're a pretty good pass protection line, but they're not nearly as good at pass protection as they are at run blocking. And that's not even quite true for Oakland. They're an amazing pass protection unit, maybe the best in the league, but they're not as good. Maybe they're average as a run blocking unit. So I think that is not a good way to characterize Latavius Murray's relative success. And I say relative because the average running back averages 4.3 yards a carry. He averaged 4 yards a carry over the last 2 seasons. So that needs to be taken into account. But I think that he was an effective runner for what they asked him to do, because he was in a lot of short yardage situations. A lot of the longer yardage runs, especially on 1st and 10, were handled by the 2 other running backs, and that's going to depress his overall yards per carry. So I don't think the offensive line has as big of an impact as a lot of people are saying.
What about his usage in shotgun? I may have missed that discussion during the podcast with you, Dusty, and Eric, but how does he line up in shotgun?
Identical. He actually, his career shotgun running average is almost identical to his career just running average in general, and he's run a lot out of shotgun as opposed to Adrian, who doesn't run that often out of shotgun. And when he was running out of shotgun, 4 yards carry. So not as big a problem, which also suggests, but I think that, there's a number of good Raiders analysts that indicate otherwise, but it suggests that he might actually be good at both zone running and man running, because shotgun running very often requires the same set of skills that is generally applicable to zone running. Ted Wynn, who is at Raiders Analysis, does point out that generally speaking, Latavius Murray has been better in power or gap running situations than he is in zone running situations. But I think, that some of that is on the offensive line, and maybe he doesn't, swing his hips as well as you might want for that kind of running style. So that might play a role. But I think that he is scheme versatile, both in the sense of being able to run with the quarterback under center and the quarterback in shotgun, as well as run versus zone, run versus gap, and so forth.
When the rumors of Adrian Peterson trying to be signed by the Patriots kind of surfaced over the past month or two. My only thought was, yeah, but Tom Brady does a lot of work in the shotgun. So why the hell would he want Adrian Peterson back there?
Yeah, I think I tweeted out something to that effect. It's like, I didn't know the Patriots were going to get rid of shotgun sets.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Like, oh, okay, so you're suggesting then that Tom Brady and the Patriots are going to scrap the offensive play calling that has done so well for them over the past, decade and a half, and instead just tailor everything to their aging running back they just signed. Yeah, that seems probable.
I will say that they had a higher proportion of runs come out of center than I thought, and that the Patriots were much more willing to signal whether or not they were going to run or pass out of their alignment than I figured that they would be. So I should walk that tweet back a little. It's funny, so I didn't delete it, but I should have walked back the background conclusion of the tweet, which is that they don't tend to run out of shotgun all that often, but still. It is important to have running backs who have that capability. I guess LeGarrette Blount is not that great of a shotgun runner, so when he's on the field, he's either pass protecting or running out of under center. The difference there, of course, is that Blount is a capable pass protector, so you didn't really give away whether or not they were going to pass or run on those plays, which is a little bit different. Then also, of course, those were plays that are often short yardage situations where you're not really concerned about giving up whether or not you're running or passing, and that was a situational role for Blount as opposed to an overall role that Adrian Peterson hopes to take on. So, yeah, I don't think he's a good fit necessarily in New England, but he's not as bad a fit, I think, as I've been implying.
And it's important to just point out real quick that Arif would rather be funny than right.
Yeah, it's my brand.
Spoiler alert: Adrian Peterson can't pass block.
Yeah, who knew?
No one who watched the Vikings for the last 5-6 years, for sure. So that's really it for the Vikings news. We are in the doldrums of the season, waiting for the draft to start. Free agency frenzy has ended, so now we get to talk about owners' meetings. And Oakland is no longer. Well, the city still exists, but the Raiders are moving. Raiders are moving to Vegas. They are intending to play in Oakland the next 2 seasons, while the stadium is being built in Las Vegas, using twice as much public money as the Vikings used.
Yeah, I guess it's being funded with a $1.50 room tax on each room in the hotels of Las Vegas.
They decided to not go with electronic pull tabs?
Yeah, weird.
I thought that was such a successful way of funding a stadium.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that a town that knows gambling would really dig in on successful gambling schemes like electronic pull tabs.
I mean, it's worked for other towns. Reason. It's worked for other towns like Ogdenville and North Haverbrook. It put them on the map. Why would you not put it?
What towns?
No, here I do it on the map.
They have a fantastic monorail system there. I just also want to point that out. So a $1.50 room tax?
That's what I saw on Twitter. I don't know if it's actually true, but it seems like it's $1.50 per night per room. In addition to the actual cost of the room, tax that funds the stadium.
Toss that on top of the resort tax or whatever.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I think that it's probably not going to deter many visitors, and I'm sure that I'm not as interested in the financing or whether or not it's worth financing the stadium in Las Vegas because I haven't done enough research on it. Traditionally, for most cities, it's not worth it. I found some research indicating that for Minneapolis specifically, it probably is worth it. So I was much more okay with public funding in that case. But who knows? Maybe a city the size of Las Vegas could take advantage of a stadium really well. I don't know. I'm kind of just more interested in whether or not it makes sense for the NFL, not just to put a team in Las Vegas, but for them to put the Oakland Raiders or I guess the Raiders in Las Vegas, because the Raiders feel like they are an institution of the West Coast, whether it's in Oakland or Los Angeles. They've built enormous followings, and I think are a part of the essential fabric of the Bay Area as well as Los Angeles. And I think that they're kind of a big part of football culture there. I'm kind of surprised that the Raiders wanted to move. I'm sure Al Davis is spinning in his grave. Beyond that, I think that nationally, it feels like they've got a connection to Oakland in a way that like the Chargers didn't really have a connection to San Diego. They were just a team that happened to play in San Diego, at least to me. The second thing is that while I think that Las Vegas is probably open to NFL expansion or having an NFL team, they're not, an A1 market for me. I think that they're the 40th largest media market in the United States, and there are smaller media markets, of course, that are NFL teams, Green Bay, Buffalo, Jacksonville come to mind. But those media markets have either, like in Green Bay and Buffalo, had football for a very, very long time, have a very dedicated fan base, and so it's not as big a deal, or are in the South, in football country, like in Jacksonville. So, that doesn't bother me as much, but I feel like that combined with the fact that Las Vegas is like full of transients makes me wonder, like, if there's enough people who feel as rooted to the region to develop a real hometown team. And, the Raiders are a national team in the sense that they have, like, national recognition and people feel affinity for them in big ways across the country, so maybe that kind of resolves some of that. But I don't know if it's, like, the best move. I would expand a team to Las Vegas maybe, but I don't know if I'd expand the Raiders. I feel like San Antonio, which is the 31st largest market in the United States, also has a team that has the same colors, which probably goes a lot further than it sounds. I think that makes more sense to me. I don't know. I would expand a team to Las Vegas, but I don't know if I'd move the Raiders there.
Now. If you're going to mention Al Davis, it should be put out there that someone did say that Al Davis would be proud of this move. Of course, it was Mark Davis who said this, but it was said aloud.
And who would know better?
I actually wrote an article. I forgot to mention that in the things that I'm associated with. I'm also a sports writer for the ArmchairAllAmericans.com, and I actually wrote an article about basically breaking the news on our site that the Raiders are officially going to be moving there. One of the things I actually talked about with a Raiders fan today on one of my podcasts was I was shocked that the NFL owners were just almost unanimously all for it. That was
surprising.
I thought there was going to be a little bit more opposition, maybe from some of the more conservative owners, but obviously that didn't happen.
Only the Dolphins. Only the Dolphins seem to have a problem with all of this, of all teams.
You're right. Well, actually, so that's an interesting question. Why the Dolphins? What do you think their objection was?
So was it actually the Dolphins that was the team that objected for it? Or they actually revealed that?
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like.
Yep, yeah, it was the Dolphins.
Wow, that is interesting. Maybe the Dolphins wanted to move there, so they didn't want. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of weird. I would not expect the Dolphins of all teams to do that. Maybe the Jaguars would object to it because they'd want to move there eventually. But I don't know why the Dolphins would of all teams would do it.
Adam Gase is just staring at that, just going, "I wanted Vegas to be mine." Anything to get me out of this humidity.
I guess one thing a Raiders fan kind of told me today was that they thought that from every indication that Oakland was a bigger media market than Vegas, so they aren't really going to probably gain many fans, if any fans, they don't think, over in Vegas, at least not right away. And a lot of the fans that are going there, they're going to be saying, hey, let's go to Vegas. Hey, the Raiders are playing there. Hey, we could just as well catch a game, too. It's not like, oh, we got to go to Vegas. We got to see the Raiders play. It's like, well, we're there already, so we might as well just see a game. So it's not like they're going to want to go see a game. It's just like, might as well.
Well, how awkward is it that they're going to be playing, they want to be playing the next 2 years, and they're going to be practicing in the Oakland area for 2 years? Like, you already have the breakup. At some point, the people are just going to stop coming, or the people who've always wanted to go are just going to buy up the tickets as cheaply as they can.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that. How fans will interact with the Raiders over the course of the next 2 years. I assume that whatever that final game is, and I think if the Raiders were allowed to by the NFL and were a little smart, they'd probably pre-sell the final home game, whatever it is, because they'd make an enormous amount of money doing that. But I think that aside from that final game, I'm wondering what attendance will be like. I mean, the Raiders are an incredibly passionate fan base, so it's not as if huge Raiders fans will necessarily decline to see the game. But Mark Davis has already indicated that he's going to refund any season tickets that have already been renewed or any season tickets that are valid throughout 2017 and probably 2018. So there's some expectation from Oakland that they're going to see less traffic. And yeah, the games are going to be kind of awkward. We saw actually the Chargers games, I thought, were kind of awkward, the way that the fans interacted with the players and the team.
Well, the last year especially, because they had their great send-off at the end of the 2015 season.
Yeah, that was super awkward.
And then they had to come back for one more year because they weren't able to get everything taken care of in the LA deal. So they're just, so we're playing one more year, guys. Wow, we seem to have our stands entirely full of the opposing team's fans. How the hell did this happen?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel for Raiders fans, especially living in the Bay Area.
Well, and I feel quickly, I feel more worse for Raiders fans than I do for Chargers fans, because at least your team's staying in state. I mean, you got the Raiders that are actually going. I mean, it's not like the Raiders are going very far either, but it's they're going to a different state while the Chargers are just basically moving up 2 hours up the interstate or whatever it is. I don't know, but I mean, it's still, just other than the name, what is really changing for the Chargers other than the name and the stadium, I guess? I don't know. But, I understand for the fans that live there, too. And I actually have a couple of friends that were from that area a little bit, so they're a little bit disappointed that they're not going to be the San Diego Chargers anymore. But still the same Chargers, still Phillip Rivers, so,
Yeah, but a smaller size city is gonna have a little bit of a inferiority complex to, say, Los Angeles, where you're San Diego people aren't necessarily going to go up to Los Angeles. It was nice while it was here, but that's 2+ hours plus the traffic plus everything else. Plus you're probably gonna have to stay there because you're not gonna be able to leave. It just ends up making it inconvenient. Whereas when they were at Qualcomm, you could just get drunk and take an Uber out of there and hope you weren't killed in the parking lot. Oh, no. Killed in the parking lots is Santa Clara, right? It's the 49ers stadium that's a problem.
Well, I think more people got killed in the parking lot of the old 49ers stadium than in the new one that no one goes to.
Well,
how could you be killed in the parking lot if no one's there?
True, but I feel like even though it's been open for a shorter period of time, that Levi Stadium is really trying to catch up to that number.
They're doing their best. They're working their hardest.
There's intangibles at play here. It's great. Another thing that was mentioned at the owners' meeting is no jumping on the line for kicks, whether it be a extra point or a field goal. How is this going to affect play next year?
It's just going to get rid of an exciting play. I think that I'm not strongly against this rule, but I am kind of against. I understand the point is player safety, but I don't know. Maybe I'm super wrong about this, and someone's going to get in my face for saying this, but I don't think anyone's been injured yet, which is not, you shouldn't only legislate safety after injuries occur. It's good to be preventative, but I think that the risk of injury on this play is actually relatively low if executed well, and if it's executed poorly, there's already a penalty in place. And if you deepen that penalty, it creates a further disincentive, and I'm totally fine with that. But I think that getting rid of an exciting play here is, kind of annoying. And again, I understand it. I would like it if it was instead maybe a trade-off. If they, revived the old kickoff rules in favor of getting rid of this. I'd be like, yeah, totally. Let's get rid of a weird special teams play for better special teams play at another end that you've kind of gotten rid of with the rules. I would definitely appreciate that.
And they also said no to adding 5 yards on the kickoff if a kicker kicks it through the uprights or something. I saw that. that they, I believe,
who was that?
put
Come
that
on,
down.
man.
Yeah, that would have been fun. No, but let's take more fun away by putting no jumping on the line. But I think they kind of already started doing that with penalties, Arif, like they were preventing people from actually using the other person as a launching pad, basically, to go over the line to block a kick, I think is kind of how they had it. But now it's kind of like you can't even jump over, period.
Yeah. Which... that blows. I like seeing it. And I did get kind of annoyed at Troy Polamalu's shtick overall when he was jumping snaps and stuff like that. It was really cool when it did work out. Got kind of annoyed with it. But I still enjoyed the Earl Thomas or whoever jumping over the line to block a kick. Now, Sharrif Floyd maybe not, but we could have seen that not working out from the get-go. I don't know, it would have been nice.
Yeah, if they were going to bring the rule in about on a kickoff, if it goes through the uprights and getting extra a couple yards or something, if they did that, they'd have to walk it back when next year they decide to remove kickoffs altogether.
No.
We all know this is coming. This is
that's why the Vikings didn't re-sign Patterson.
Yeah.
Let's face the music.
This is going to happen. This is going to eventually be a thing, and ugh. It'll be fun. Also, Roger Goodell, still a douchebag. He was in the news talking about trying to shorten the length of games and make the games more exciting. I believe the best quote was talking about how he doesn't like it that what will happen is there's a kickoff and then it will kickoff, commercial, first play or for like first 3 plays, commercial or something like that. Like I want to improve the play of it somehow. But I don't know exactly how we're going to do it. It's like, yeah, you're the one guy who actually has the power to do this.
Yeah, right. Like, okay, so I think he said commercial kickoff, commercial play, I think was the thing that he said that people don't like. I don't know how we're going to go. Like, well, you could just not do that. Like, it's not that you could just make sure that you don't do that. I don't know. It's
yeah. I think he actually. I think they have actually gotten rid of that now. I think they're going to what they said. They're just going to make one of those breaks longer, I think, and I think that's a good idea because once you get like so many breaks in a row, it for me anyway. It's kind of makes you disinterested a little bit more. I mean, obviously, if it's a Vikings game, I'm going to pay attention. But if I'm just watching another regular NFL game and I see another break come on, it's like, I'm going to go watch another game or I'm going to go watch this, and I get where he's coming from. I actually agree with that. If you make the one break just a little bit longer, and then cut the other break out, I actually like that idea. But yeah,
I don't know,
couldn't have changed that.
I think that we're almost at sort of a critical mass for the length of those breaks anyway, and they're not super long, but they're sporting events, and so they're not supposed to be that long. And it gets frustrating. I mean, if you turn a 2.5 minute break into a 3 minute break, I think that it significantly, I think you're already at the point where you're significantly detracting from interest in the game if you're not like a hardcore fan of the team, or I guess even just a casual fan of the team is probably going to watch through a 3 minute break. And it makes it more likely that you're just going to flip to another commercial or flip to another station and watch what's happening at the other station, hopefully another football game, and just kind of stay there for a while just because of how long it takes. So I think that the amount of commercials have already begun to degrade the NFL game watching experience, both at home and in the stadium, in a way that I think is almost prohibitive. And, there are obviously sports with no commercial breaks, like soccer, and sports that have, more natural commercial breaks, like, basketball. But I think that it really, you've started sapping flow out already, and I think that moving those breaks around is not an ideal solution for fans. And I guess, the challenge for the NFL is to find sort of the intersection of the line, right, where they can maximize the amount of revenue from advertising space and minimize fan disinterest so you can keep up those eyeballs on advertising space. And if this is the solution where you can find the intersection of that line, that's better for them, but it still kind of, I think, sucks for fans.
And I suppose we could take this right into the mailbag because we have a really great question on something that Logan Reed would like clarification on. He says, quote, I need clarification on the actions to conserve time with under 2 minutes rule. Does that mean spiking the ball, and more importantly, running out of bounds? Is that now illegal?
So this rule is actually just about acts that are already penalized. So it is a result of the Ravens having multiple players hold in essentially punt protection while the clock was running out. That way, they don't have to enforce an offensive penalty at the 0 mark rule. So the previous rule was that play cannot end on a defensive penalty. So if there's a defensive penalty, even if the clock strikes 0, play is going to continue. But if it's an offensive penalty, which is what the Ravens were essentially engaging in on a punt, play will just run out at the 0 point. And so they were just getting rid of that. So it's an unsportsmanlike penalty if there's multiple penalties. So not one, but if there's multiple penalties, it's an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on the offending team. And then the clock is going to go back to where it was before then, so it only hurts you. So it forces a play to occur without penalty.
Let's go to the next question, which is from Ludog on Twitter, who asks, do you guys think there is a conspiracy on the Vikes to omit/downplay injury? Guys like Barr seem injured but slugged on. Isn't this the culture in every NFL team?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would say it seems like the Vikings maybe didn't maybe disclose everything regarding the Barr injury. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know, but it just feels like there was something with Barr. Like I don't know. It just seems like he wouldn't drop off. I mean, maybe he did, which is always possible, but it just seemed kind of weird the way that he dropped off this year. I don't know how to really describe it other than it was weird. I don't know what your take on that is, Arif, but
yeah. So the thing about Barr is that I think it's convenient for fans to point to injury as a reason that he was playing poorly, and certainly there are signs where you can say, hey, he's not as aggressive here, that could be a result of injury. Hey, he's not wrapping up his tackles, that could be a result of the wrist injury that was disclosed, I think, in week 3 or week 4, that Vikings fans in general seem to think is continuing to be a problem for him. But I do think that there was stuff that wasn't related to his injury. I felt like he was slower at diagnosing and reacting to what was happening. I don't know why that would be, but it certainly seemed like he was losing in a lot of facets of his game. Now, in the second half, he did generate more pressure as a blitzer, which was really nice. But I think that for the most part, most of the elements of linebacker play were impacted by whatever was affecting Barr. And I don't think injury is an easy enough explanation for that. I don't really think that to the extent that all NFL teams omit and downplay injury, I think that plays a role. But I don't think in this case injury is a catch-all explanation for why Barr played poorly. I just don't have another explanation.
Next question is from Hoodie, who asks a very serious one. Says, who would win in a 50-meter race? Treadwell, Kareem Hurt, or a snail running in molasses?
Hoodie's making fun of me because I love Kareem Hunt, and he did not run super fast at his pro day, but I swear he's faster on film. I would say Kareem Hunt would win that race. That's how much I dislike the Treadwell pick.
Well, and a snail doesn't, as was pointed out quickly on Twitter, a snail does
Snails
not
don't run. Yeah.
So there is that. Side note, and I don't know how you feel about this, Arif. I don't know if you've actually seen him before, but there's video of Hoodie like in like as a real person. I'm against this.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he's on the Viking. I forget if it's Vikings territory, but they do like a mailbag, or not a mailbag, like a 6-screen video podcast, and he was on it, and he's a real person. And like,
I'm strongly against this.
I like the idea of him just being an anthropomorphic Hoodie. And even though since things like went political and he went, JZH as opposed to just implicating Judd Zulgad there, but seeing him as an actual person, in the Ohio State hoodie just ruins the mystery. I'm saddened. I'm saddened by it. I'm not mad, hoodie. I'm just disappointed. Nick Olson on Twitter asks, who had the better supporting cast, including receivers, protection, scheme, and run game? Teddy or Bradford?
I would argue that Bradford had a better supporting cast in a lot of respects. I think that the offensive line was worse, but I think that the scheme more than made up for it. So Bradford was only pressured on about 39-42% of his dropbacks, which was among the lowest in the league, but it wasn't the lowest. Teddy was pressured more often than any other quarterback has in the past decade of Pro Football Focus recording the pressure stat. So I think that is enough of an indication that when you combined pressure and pass protection scheme together, I think that Teddy had a worse go of it. And then I think that between the receivers that Teddy and Bradford had, I mean, there's not, a difference except that Treadwell showed up once, I guess, for Bradford. Teddy did have to deal with Mike Wallace for a second, but I think that overall the receivers is not a big a deal. And I think that Pat Shurmur's scheme from a passing perspective did a lot more favors for Bradford, even though the running game was better for Teddy. So I think that on balance, I would say that things are worse for Teddy. But, it's not a huge difference in terms of supporting cast between the two. I think both were unfairly impacted by the situation and circumstances around them. But I will say that Teddy probably had a worse supporting cast, and I would say that Teddy overall displays better quarterbacking skills.
Well, and you didn't have the rise of Adam Thielen, which maybe Bradford had a part of doing.
That's a good point, yeah.
So maybe Bradford did have a part of doing that, where Teddy had his connection with Charles Johnson, and obviously Sam Bradford didn't. Maybe it was just Bradford and Thielen that had that connection that Teddy didn't have with him. Who knows? But, yeah, I would agree. I would say Bradford definitely had the worst offensive line just because of injury. I mean, obviously he still had T.J. Clemmings, but they still had he still had a worse offensive line, didn't have as much of a running game, but I feel like the passing attack was much more catered to Sam Bradford than it was to Peterson. So, I mean, the offense, I think, was based around Sam Bradford, like when Pat Shurmur, especially when Pat Shurmur took over, where Teddy, the only time he had the offense basically based around him was the 2014, his rookie season, the last 5 games, which I just wrote an article today. Again, you can check it out on armchairallamericans.com. The last 5 games of Teddy's rookie season, he had a passer rating of 105.5, 8 touchdowns, 1,230 yards, 71.7% completion percentage, and a 69.3% QBR, total QBR. And that would be this season. It would be ranked 8th in the NFL this season if he would have, of course, lived up to that. It would be ahead of Tyrod Taylor, who I'm also a fan of, Arif, as I know you are.
Yeah, no, those last 5 games were astounding, and I was really ready for that, the story of 2015. The issue is that if you take a look at a lot of what was happening in 2014, they just weren't installed in 2015. So the difference between the last 5 weeks and the first 11, I guess, but however many games that Teddy actually played, so minus the Castle game, minus the Ponder game, the difference between those two is that they implemented the very stuff that we wanted to happen this year with Bradford and was implemented with Bradford, the 3-step, 5-step drops, the ball was getting out quicker. Teddy did have a more compact throwing motion in those final 5 games as well, so it's not just, the cast around him, but I think that they implemented the scheme that was successful, and then they went back to the really heavy 7-step drop style, not deep passing, but passing scheme that put more pressure on the offensive line and required more of Teddy Bridgewater in terms of escapability and in terms of deep accuracy than the scheme that Bradford ultimately had to deal with and that Teddy had for those 5 special games. So, yeah, and those 5 games were astounding. I think that over the course of those 5 games, So for the same 5 games that all of the quarterbacks had, only one of the quarterback had a higher pass rating, and I think it was Aaron Rodgers. It was nice to see him, carve up some teams at the end of his rookie year.
And if you're wondering, it did take me like 10 minutes to figure out all those stats.
Minnesota North Star on Twitter asks, is Alexander really ready to be in the slot, or is this another Winfield situation? Also, any predictions on backup quarterback?
I wouldn't be surprised if a backup quarterback ends up being an undrafted free agent, or is Taylor Heineke, or is a late-round quarterback, although this is not a great quarterback class to grab one of those late-round guys. Maybe they get Josh Dobbs. I'd be pretty happy with that. As for Mackenzie Alexander, the reference to the Winfield situation, I assume, is a reference to Terrence Newman, who would have the capability of playing outside, then in nickel situations would kick inside with Trey Waynes playing outside as a backup. And that would make, I think, a lot of sense and is something that is nice to have in your pocket while you're trying to figure out if Mackenzie Alexander is going to get a shot at the slot. For now, I'm going to trust Mike Zimmer when he says that Mackenzie Alexander is going to get the first shot at the cornerback, the nickel cornerback slot, and that it is not his job to lose, but it's going to be up to him whether or not he wins it. So I don't know if he's ready. He didn't look great last year, but I have more faith in him than I do in Trey Waynes, who I liked Mackenzie coming out. I didn't like Trey Waynes coming out. That's kind of informing my opinion going forward of their capability to continue to progress because they both had limited snaps. I don't think Trey Waynes looked as good as a lot of people say he did last year, and I think that statistically he had a fine season. I think that generally speaking he had a pretty poor season, and so I'm going to acknowledge that I have faith in Trey Waynes than I do in Mackenzie Alexander, even though Waynes probably had a better year than Alexander limited snaps.
Yeah, I would agree with your idea that Alexander probably has. I probably have more faith in Alexander if I'm talking about from just a work ethic and a talent perspective. I mean, yeah, Trey Waynes obviously has got talent, but I just think I just don't know if his work ethic is there. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that, but I feel like his work ethic is probably not as good as Mackenzie Alexander. That could be the difference between the two guys. Obviously, Alexander was still learning in his first year, but actually, I know it wasn't really meant to be a comparison, but I kind of like the comparison of Mackenzie Alexander and Antoine Winfield from a perspective of how they kind of match a little bit. Like I think Alexander is about the same height as Winfield, and maybe Winfield was kind of more a do it all kind of corner. I don't know if Mackenzie Alexander can be a really good tackler or not, but I would say I'm still a little concerned. This would probably be, other than the other linebacker spot, I would say the cornerbacks are kind of still a little concerned for me, Arif, just from the aspect of I kind of want another guy that can be kind of an insurance policy. And I mean, you still have options like in free agency and in the draft, but I don't know if you want to. I kind of want to bring in another veteran because, I mean, you have Rhodes and you have Newman. Maybe you bring in a guy like Nickel Roby-Coleman, who I kind of like from Buffalo, and I kind of didn't mind Kawan Williams before he signed, I believe, with San Francisco. But I don't know. I'm just not so confident in these other two corners, and that's why I think Captain Munnerlyn, as many Vikings fans that I know agree, Captain Munnerlyn was one of the biggest losses in free agency.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. And again, while I do have some faith that Mackenzie Alexander is going to improve, it would be nice if there was a little bit more depth behind him because there's no guarantee that he's going to improve. And all evidence that we have in terms of his NFL career is that he hasn't adapted to what it takes to be good in the NFL. I think that having Terrence Newman as a backup to either play on the outside as a backup to Trey Waynes or be the starter and then kick inside in nickel kind of resolves some of those depth concerns. Also, I think that I would rather actually draft a guy because this is an even better draft for cornerbacks than it is for running backs. And again, super talented running back class. But this cornerback class is nuts. I mean, there's quite possibly 20% of a lot of big boards as top 50 are cornerbacks and just cornerbacks. Like, there are a lot of really good cornerbacks in this draft. And so if the Vikings, feel the need to, instead of drafting an offensive lineman in the second round, draft a cornerback instead, they might end up getting a stud, and they might end up being able to replace Captain Munnerlyn, or I guess by proxy then Mackenzie Alexander or Trey Waynes. And I think that would be an interesting situation, because then you've got the incredible depth that the Vikings did have last year as well, and that depth was tested even in the early on in the season against Carolina. They went all the way down to Marcus Sherrills. It would be nice if they grabbed another cornerback, and I think that it would be better to do that in the draft than it would be to sign a veteran.
I guess predictions on backup quarterback. I honestly don't know if the Vikings, if Bridgewater says to the Vikings that he thinks he's going to be ready by training camp, even just to do some light things, I think Bridgewater could potentially, and this is probably more optimistic than maybe I should be, I think he could be the backup quarterback. And I mean, you got Taylor Heineke yet, where if something does go wrong with Bridgewater, you can just go with Heineke as your backup, or you can sign somebody off the street, like bring Sean Hill back or something off of his couch or whatever. But I don't know if it, I mean, for sure next year I think you want to draft a quarterback, but I don't know if it's going to be a necessity this year, unless you are really confident Teddy Bridgewater has absolutely no chance of being even on the Vikings depth chart at all this year, which I mean, from today, I'm a lot more optimistic than what I was probably even just yesterday about Bridgewater coming back. But then also, as a cornerback, I had also wrote an article about two guys that I kind of thought would be interesting. I think his name's Fabian Moreau from UCLA at corner in the draft, and then also Corn Elder, which I know you guys talked about on the Andy Luke and Arif football machine. Who's a really good tackler. I think he had like 76 tackles his senior year. But his coverage skills are a little bit to be desired from what I heard. I mean, I didn't really watch much, if any, film on him, but from just kind of some scouting reports that I read, it sounded like he had some coverage issues. But I guess those are my thoughts on those two positions.
Yeah, Fabian's interesting. I'm a little bit worried about his... I think he had an injury at his pro day, kind of like Sidney Jones. I'm not sure. There's an injury concern somewhere there with Fabian Moreau. I'm sure I'm going to look it up after the show and feel stupid about it. That would be interesting. DeMonte Kazee, somebody that Luke loves. I'm a little bit less high on him than Luke is. But there's a lot of potential slot corners in this draft, and then I think a lot of the corners in this draft that a lot of people are projecting to the outside are agile enough and smart enough to play in the slot. So obviously you're not going to draft Marshawn Lattimore, who's probably going to be the first corner taken to be a slot guy, but he's a good example of the fact that you've got guys who can play well on the outside and probably play well on the inside too when called upon. His teammate Gary Conley would be really good at that. I think that Marlon Humphrey's test scores indicate that he's probably capable of playing in the slot, and he's played in pro-style defenses, which I think is really important, and in particular in a coverage scheme that's very close to what the Vikings do. He could fall to the second round. I think they could probably play inside or outside. There's a lot of guys here, essentially. And what's interesting is that there's also a lot of guys that you probably only want on the outside. People like Jadobi Awuzie, Rasul Douglas, guys who are probably only outside guys that would be interesting kind of as depth. But it also leaves room, I think, for a lot of these guys that can play both inside and outside. So I'm kind of interested to see how that breaks down. Corn Elder there's a lot of fans of Corn Elder out there. I'm a little bit less high on him than Luke is, but I think that one of the most underrated skills for a slot cornerback is run support, because, of course, one of the things that they like to do when you're in nickel is if they've got a favorable matchup in run blocking, they'll probably run right at your nickel corner. And if you've got a guy like Antoine Winfield, it's a bad idea, but if you've got a guy like potentially Mackenzie Alexander or Marcus Sherrills, that's probably a good idea. So seeing, some of these slot corners that are actually pretty good in the run game, like Corn Elder, and there's a couple of others, and I've already forgot. There's so many that I'm kind of overwhelmed and I've already forgotten the names of a lot of them. There's a couple of slot corners here that are actually pretty good in run support, so that'd be interesting to see if they, grab one of those guys.
Next question is from Rob on Twitter, who asks, Detroit is getting really good power rankings post-free agency. Did they upgrade that much?
I would argue that the first mistake is that you looked at power rankings post-free agency.
If we're going to look at the problem of your question, let's look at the core of this.
Yeah, this is the higher level. Let's step back from the trees, take a look at the forest problem with your question. But I think beyond that, yeah, I think they did. I mean, they grabbed, the right tackle that everybody wanted, Ricky Wagner, and I think that upon analysis, Ricky Wagner's got a little bit more of a suspect career at right tackle because he had a great year. How many years has he been a good right tackle? Not that many. But I still think, they definitely upgraded the right tackle situation. And it kind of sucks to say that because, hey, the Vikings not only pursued Ricky Wagner, they grabbed the right tackle that they upgraded from. So it feels weird. But, he's going to play left tackle. He'll be fine. They also they signed TJ Lang, right? Like, that's really good. And I think, was it Larry Warford went to the Texans or to the Saints or something? Somewhere south, or did they re-sign him too?
No, I don't remember where he went. He went, I think he went somewhere south. But I agree. They really improved their offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that if you improve your offensive line, Amir Abdul is healthy. You've got Zach Zenner there. I think that it makes sense to be kind of a high on Detroit, especially with how good of a job offensively. The JVC, Jim Bob Cooter, has been able to...
The notorious
JVC has been able to organize that offense. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't really know how good their power rankings... Like, if their power rankings put them at, number one, then, I'd be a little suspect. But I think that, for the most part, they did improve their team pretty significantly.
It's funny that my family calls my uncle, his nickname is Cooter. So we always joke with him about the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator.
What did your uncle do to get that nickname?
I feel like if you have to ask, you shouldn't know.
Yeah, maybe.
That's a good point.
Some certain family secrets are just better not said. Skull88 on Twitter asks, what remaining free agents do you see the Vikings giving a shot?
I guess Nikel Roby-Coleman. I haven't really thought about the remaining free agents or even who a remaining free agent for the Vikings is. I probably should have looked it up as soon as I saw this question, but then I got lazy. I don't think there's going to be that many big names. And hey, you could always end up with a Tom Johnson situation where you've got a sort of a late signing free agent that no one really knows about, that hasn't had a stellar career or anything like that. And he could end up not just making the team, but playing a pretty pivotal role on the offense and the defense. And we don't know who that would be. I'm pretty arrogant, but I'm not arrogant enough to say this guy is going to be as good as Tom Johnson from the exact same background of obscurity that Tom Johnson came from. It's unlikely that we'll be able to figure it out. I don't know who's remaining in free agency, and I don't know if any of the guys that are remaining in free agency will have that kind of impact, but certainly it's possible.
I would say, and I know Andy Carlson has been talking about bringing Anquan Bolden in, and I know he talked about that last year, which I'm for it, especially right now, because the oldest receiver on a receiving core is Jarius Wright. So I mean, it's not like we've got a lot of experience there, and I think it'd be good for Thielen to also have somebody to kind of look up to as he continues to grow and get better. And Diggs, of course, maybe he can teach him how to not get hurt as much. I don't know, because Diggs, if Diggs can stay healthy, I think he could be just. He's already incredible, but I think he could just be even that much better. But I think if you add Bolden and he can kind of be that Kyle Rudolph / tight end B or whatever you want to say, he's kind of like a security blanket, because a lot of Detroit fans were saying he would be catching the ball on third and 7, and he'd be getting 8 yards. So he'd be getting just the amount of yards they need. So kind of the security blanket, from a tight end. I think the Vikings need that. They kind of need that kind of guy. And I know you weren't as a big of a fan of them potentially bringing in Jared Cook, but maybe his performance was risen by Aaron Rodgers quite a bit last year from the receiving perspective. But I thought, as kind of that receiving tight end with Rudolph and now David Morgan, I thought maybe you could bring in just kind of a basic receiving / receiver tight end kind of a guy. But I think if you bring in Anquan Bolden, that would be a good move. And of course, maybe just signing another corner or drafting one, like you said, Arif. I agree. This corner class is very deep, so maybe you don't need to sign another corner.
Jared Cook actually didn't have that good of a year last year. He just got some pretty decent playoff performances. He only had 370 yards, so I don't know, man. 1 touchdown, 377 yards, the lowest yardage he's had since 2010. I'm going to say he's not that good. I'm not that interested in signing this dude. And he showed up to a tight end needy team with the greatest quarterback of all time and grabbed less than 400 yards. Whatever. Anquan Boldin, I'm definitely on board with. Of course, he had a career low in yards. That's unsurprising for somebody who is 36, going to enter his age 37 year. But his 600 yards that he had for Detroit, 584 yards, but 8 touchdowns that he had for Detroit. I think within the role that you described, a guy that on third down has just enough to move the chains. Plus, evidently he's a red zone threat. Would be really nice, and I don't know if he would be able to play a significant role with the Vikings. They won't need him to with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, or if he'd play a relatively minor role and sort of trade off in the same role as Laquan Treadwell, and try to get them to sort of play in similar fashion. Whatever he does within that context would be worth it, I think, for the Vikings. Whether or not it's to teach Laquan Treadwell, which again, veterans don't necessarily do that, or just provide the element that either Treadwell is missing or that Treadwell needs, or something along those lines to play that role in the offense that the Vikings so clearly indicated that they want to have. Either he could teach him or replace him or whatever, but I think that you're right, that would be a pretty good idea.
Matt Lutman sent us a quick email question. Actually sent 2 of them that we're going to answer here. First one is, who looks the worst if Khalil has a good season in Carolina? I'm going to say the NFL's PED testing department, because if he starts having like some amazing career, it's much like when Pat McAfee, or when McAfee, the punter for the Colts, when he would just truck somebody out of bounds on a Sunday night, immediately on his Twitter, he'd be like, oh, getting tested again. Like, I feel like they should pay close attention. If he all of a sudden has a career year in Carolina, you should be testing that man.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of that. My first thought was Tony Sparano, and, maybe Jeff Davidson, the offensive line coach, previously for the Minnesota Vikings, and the current offensive line coach, Tony Sparano. If whoever the offensive line coach in Carolina is, who I've already forgotten their name, looked it up, but I don't remember. If whoever he is has the ability to get that out of Matt Khalil, but the 2 offensive line coaches in Minnesota don't have that ability, I don't think that's on, Rick Spielman or Mike Zimmer or Norv Turner or Pat Shurmur, although, Norv Turner didn't really do Khalil any favors with the way that the scheme was set up. I think it's on the coach, because they clearly identified the talent. They gave Matt Khalil time to be coached, and the coaches had all the time and resources that they needed. Letting him go obviously made the most sense, and everybody was a fan of it at the time, and I don't think that you could say, if he has a good year, that Spielman was the one who made a mistake. I think that here the clear problem would be with the offensive line coaches, and I don't think he's going to have a good year.
He's gonna be so inspired to play well because he's playing with his brother Arif. That's what's gonna make him better. I'm telling you, that's what's
it's a good point. It's a good point. Hadn't considered that.
The signing of Khalil just shows that Carolina does not care about Cam Newton. I'm sorry. It just looking like goes, oh,
that's true. They just don't.
So you're ready to move on from the MVP from the all right, whatever. Next question from Matt Lutman, who asks, if O-line improves, what position group is most likely to become the new worst position group for the Vikings?
O-line.
It's always O-line.
It's so far below the other position groups. Even if you have a bad opinion of Jerick McKinnon, if you don't like him, and obviously, many people who don't like Jerick McKinnon probably wouldn't like Matt Asiata at all. And Adrian Peterson's gone, whatever that means to your evaluation of the running back group. Even if you don't like those guys, there's no way that you can think that they, as a group, would be worse than a somewhat improved offensive line group, especially because you have to be worried about, at one point, they have to replace Joe Berger this year or next year. And we've been talking up the offensive line in terms of the ways that it has improved, but, 2 reality checks. One, we did this last year. then they all died, and you got a new offensive line that was worse. 2, there's still a lot of things that have to go right. Jeremiah Sirles has to look as good as he did for the one game that he played guard for an entire season, which that happened to Mike Harris, so it's possible. But again, one game. I mean, Jeremiah Sirles looked really good in his first game at tackle that he, crapped the bed. Nick Easton looked really good in his one game at center, and then he crapped the bed. So it's not as if he's going to be a good guard. So you have to have that go right. You have to have both the Mike Remmers and Riley Reef situations go right. And I think that they will, and I think there's good arguments for it. But the issue is that you have to argue yourself into it. And every time you have to argue yourself into a player being good, there's a higher likelihood that something could go wrong in some respect. And so there is some level of this offensive line group is probably not going to be an incredibly good offensive line group. And I think, people ask me, what do you think of this offensive line group? And I was like, I think it's going to improve massively, and I think it will be a below average offensive line. Like, that's how far they have to get. But I like the quarterback group. I'll admit that I was kind of wrong on Bradford's I was really wrong on Bradford's skill level. I'm a huge fan of Jerick McKinnon. I will probably be a fan of whatever other running back they bring in. I like these receivers, especially Adam Thielen, improving pretty significantly, even if I'm worried about Laquan Treadwell. I think that the tight end group is thin, but I think Kyle Rudolph is ultimately talented, and I'm really interested to see what David Morgan's going to do. So offensively, there's not that many areas that I'm worried about. I'm worried about under tackle on the defensive line, but the defensive line group overall, of course, is very good. The cornerback group is pretty good. It's headlined by Xavier Rhodes, and I think Terrence Newman is still talented. So, the question is whether or not Waynes and Alexander could improve. Maybe they're your second, candidate for looking bad if it's not running back. And then, of course, safety group. There's only one safety you have to worry about, Andrew Sandeo, and he just put in a career year. Linebacker group, I'm confident that Anthony Barr is going to improve. Eric Hendricks already looks really good. The only question is what's going to happen to that third linebacker spot, and maybe that's your third or fourth candidate for worst position group for the Vikings. But I still think it's going to be offensive line.
So Arif, when you were saying Searles had one game, crap the bed, and who was the other guy you said crap the bed after one game?
Nick Easton. So are you saying Rashad Hill is going to do the same thing? He might. We've had a lot of good one-game performances from offensive linemen.
Maybe he's the outlier, but maybe we shouldn't take the chance on that. Maybe that's why we signed Riley Reef.
Yeah, maybe don't go all in on Rashad Hill.
I don't really know. Maybe that other safety spot, maybe the linebacking core. I mean, I guess if Anthony Barr continues to go downhill, which I definitely hope doesn't happen, and I don't think it will, maybe he'll stay exactly how he was last year. But if Anthony Barr does not improve or get to the point, or if he's just bad next year, I would say linebacker could be the weakest position group if the Vikings, of course, improve the offensive line. But yeah, it's the offensive line until we get to top half of the league for sure, and even then it's like, we still might be worse, better off at some of the other positions still, even if we are a top 15 offensive line, top 16, whatever. But yeah, I would say linebacking core would be a concern if Barr doesn't improve, but I would also agree tight end. Maybe, but once we add George Kittle from Iowa, then that'll be solved along with Rudolph. And
that's a good point.
So yeah,
that would change a couple of things anyway. A bit of a side note before we finish. I was reading on Reddit in the NFL subreddit. They were talking about the weakest receiving core, per division. And a lot of people seem to believe that the NFC North has the weakest, would have the weakest wide receiving core. Do you think that's accurate, or do you feel like there's somebody else that, or there's another division that is that is probably a little bit more true for?
Got to be the AFC East. I'm not going to defend the NFC North receiving core. And obviously, if you asked that question 3 years ago, you get like a bunch of really crazy stares: Jordy Nelson, Calvin Johnson, Alshon Jeffrey, Brandon Marshall, a Viking. But I think that I don't know. I don't really like the AFC East receiving core. Specifically, you got Sammy Watkins, who when he's healthy is very, very good. And Julian Edelman, I'm not going to denigrate too much, but I'm not a huge fan of the Miami Dolphins receiving core. The Jets just lost Brandon Marshall, and I like Eric Decker, but I don't have a bunch of faith in Quincy Enunwa. I liked Devin Smith, but he hasn't done enough for me to say that he's any good. And I would say that, yeah, maybe there's not any premier receivers like there are Sammy Watkins and Julian Edelman in the AFC East. But I still think that, second half of the year, Jordy Nelson was good enough. The Bears lost Alshon Jeffrey. But I think that Golden Tate is a good enough receiver to, I think, maybe, I'm not going to say make up for it, but overcome the really abysmal receiving core that the AFC East has.
And you said, and I also kind of thought AFC West, maybe, if you take away the top 3 or 4 guys, like a Demaryius Thomas or an Emmanuel Sanders, and if you want to throw Tyreek Hill in there or whatever. But and Keenan Allen was kind of rising, I thought, before he had his injury. But I think the AFC West, for the most part, other than the 3 or 4 guys at the top, their receivers are pretty weak. You still got Diggs and you still got Jordy Nelson. Maybe now that the Bears lost Jeffrey, that kind of takes away from our receiving core, and of course Calvin Johnson retiring. But I don't know. I feel like the AFC West could maybe also make a case for being one of the worst also. And there's probably another division that I can't think of either. So.
Well, I was looking at the list of receivers that they'd put in, and they were like, oh, okay, we're going to do 3 per team. And so it went Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, Jared Abbrederis, Cameron Meredith, Kevin White, Kendall Wright, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, and Laquan Treadwell. And my only comment was, let's scale back on the Treadwell part, guys. I feel like you're trying to put a finger on the scale here.
Yeah, I think so. It reduces the overall average, and that's not fair.
it's just not nice. So that's going to be it for this week's show. You survived, Carson.
I did. I'm a little surprised, I guess. I don't know. I'm good.
Did you expect to die? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was wondering because Dusty wished me like extra luck, so I was like, am I gonna die or what's gonna happen here?
No, actually, you know what Dusty does when we're taping and he's not on is he will just randomly pop onto our Google Hangout and just mention. Just want to let you guys know we're all counting on you. Or just,
no pressure or anything.
He'll just quote airplane and just throughout an entire taping. So, in fact, once I post this, he will likely say the exact same thing.
All right. Well,
he's lovable.
I did make it through.
Carson, let's talk just a little bit. The 2 shows that you have, what's the difference between the 2 shows that you put out?
So my first show, the You Don't Know Jack show, which I started back in August of last year. Yeah, way back then. I started that with my 2 cousins, and we talk about mainly NFL and NBA, but we also talk about college basketball and college football. We are definitely not experts in those fields in particular, but we're not really experts at all, but we're a little bit more knowledgeable with the professional sports, I would say, and college basketball is probably the least I know about, but we get guests on from the website that I write for, armchairallamericans.com. I've gotten college basketball writers. I've gotten NFL writers from the different teams that we have covered. And NBA, we got the NBA writer, the department head for the NBA on our website. We've gotten him on there. So we've gotten all kinds of guests on there. Next week, we're going to be having a draft expert on from Armchair. So I'm looking forward to that. And my other show, the Shuby Show, which is doesn't have much popularity yet, so please go check it out.
To be fair, it just started, didn't it?
Yes, it just started the last couple of weeks here. So It's still kind of getting traction, so that's about 50% sports, just kind of anything I want to talk about. We just talked about the Raiders moving to LV, I should say, today, and also talked a little bit about the Raiders offseason with a Raiders fan. And also, we'll be talking about some history. But the second episode we did, I talked about Chuck Berry and his passing, and what a musical legend he was. And of course, you don't have copyrights, so I can't play any of his songs. So it was pretty much just me saying Chuck Berry was really good. Chuck Berry was really good.
No one was trying to make the guitar solos with their mouth or anything, or trying to scat it out or anything.
No. So I did list some of the songs and kind of a little bit of what he had throughout his life, what he did throughout his life, and that kind of thing. It was a short episode because I kind of ran out of things to say about Chuck Berry, because I've never been obviously to one of his concerts or anything, but I obviously know some of the popular songs, and he was a legend kind of in rock and roll.
So it's kind of it's a half sports show, half like a pop culture random things that are going on kind of thing you want to talk about, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
So if you're interested in either of those, the links for these will be included in the iTunes drop, as well as it should be appearing for most of your podcast aggregators in the notes for the show. You should also be able to find that on NorseCodePodcast.com. Arif, do you have anything to plug this week?
Well, we're going to drop the new episode of Wide Left Podcast, which is me going off in politics. I'm sure I've plugged it enough times on this podcast for people who are at least remotely interested to have checked it out once, but we're going to be covering the tinfoil hat stuff, the Russia stuff. So if people are interested in that, we'll do that. And then also, I'm going to be putting out a lot more written content as we head up to the draft. So not just the analytic stuff that's all spreadsheets and, hey, here's what the athleticism numbers and production numbers say, but also, film breakdowns of various prospects that I'm interested in, maybe substantiate my disagreement with Luke or boost up my agreements with Luke about the draft prospects that we like or dislike.
Sounds good. Well, that is going to be it for us at Norse Code. If you would like to donate to us, you can donate to us at patreon.com/Norse Code or to paypal.me/Norse Code. We always appreciate any reviews or any help out that you guys can give. So thanks again for listening. And on behalf of Carson and Arif, thank you. And our formula is apparently this: only a little below average. And we'll see you next week.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, NorseCodePodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to NorseCodePodcast.com. On behalf of James and Arif, my name is Dusty, and we all thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.
I know, that is a heck of a sackup right there.
The number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. Only a little below average.
But think about it, it's really fitting. We're talking about the Vikings. Only a little below average. That's
This is the best Vikings team I've seen in years. They are a little below.
Just a little, yep. Only a little, not way below. Customarily way below.
That is perfect, especially for the current climate of Vikings Twitter.